Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of Heiser Says. Today I'd like to talk about the truth concerning Akon Mawien and the fact that he didn't have to go to jail. Now, recently down in Melbourne there has been a apparent crime spree with the Sudanese youth and the Apex gang. Now, myself here in Brisbane, I have connections to 3 crimes in very recent times that involve Sudanese group. There was a robbery in the convenience store above where I have my shop. One of my staff members, his father, got mugged in the street, and another gentleman I know was mugged just up the street as well. So what you have to be cognizant of or aware of is that when you have these little things in your memory, your mind, your psychology will put more weight to them. If something bad happens, you'll put more weight to it. You'll be more concerned about it. That's natural. That's evolutionary. That's to keep you safe. So when you start hearing things like Sudanese gang, Sudanese this, down in Melbourne, and you've heard about it happening up here in Brisbane, I'm at quite risk of thinking there's a tremendous crime wave going on and going down all these crazy spiraling traps of just falling victim to what the news is putting out. So when I first heard about this, and there's a few articles here. So Melbourne teen Akon Mawien avoids prison after violent jewellery thefts. Co-offenders Akon Mawien jailed. So Akon got off, Maker got jailed. The natural response to that is thinking, that's bullshit. What's going wrong? Why isn't this guy in jail? Why is the judge Why is the judge acted so stupid? They're just letting these people off, letting them getting away with anything. Now that is the natural response. That's the reflex, and that's the first response I had, particularly with the personal stories I've encountered and the fact that 10:30 one night, four young guys barged into a bloody shop here in Brisbane, just above my business, and rob someone at knife point. So that's fine. I'm aware of that. I've got that bias there. So naturally, I was all on board with the outrage that people were having. But then I took pause and realized, well, I don't trust anything the news ever says anymore. All I am to them is a click or read or someone that they can sell advertising to. They don't give a crap, and they've only got a tiny window to actually portray a particular situation. So they'll frame it in such a way to attract attention and to get you to consume their product, because that's what their product is. Whereas the judge who's making this decision isn't the clown the media portrays. You have to be pretty smart to get to that position in our civilization. It's not just handed out. You can't go and say, okay, I want to be a judge. I'm going to pay $100 million to such and such, and I'll buy my way in. We're not that type of civilization. I know some people may think we are, but we're really not here in Australia. Corruption isn't that bad. So you'd have to think, giving the judges the benefit of the doubt, because they have to dwell on these decisions and they have to live with the consequences for their entire lives. Now, I would be shocked if they were sociopaths or psychotic and didn't actually appreciate the implications of their decision. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they would, because all of us would, most of us. So let's have a quick look at this article here. One of them, I've got a few here. So what will we draw with today? Blue. We like blue. So a teenager who helped steal $200,000 worth of jewellery during armed robberies in Melbourne has avoided jail, with a county court judge attributing his violent and lawless behaviour to his use of the drug ice. Now, most people will read that, and that's it. They'll go away. They won't read more than the first bit of the news and go, oh, that's bullshit. What's going on with this country? Yada, yada, yada. Facebook, comment, which is completely understandable. So here are some of the key points that they'll pull out. So Akon, 19, and Maker, 18, were promised cash and girls for stolen goods. Oh, well, there you go. Same old story. Mawien was given a 2-year community corrections order. Mawien was given a 4-year jail sentence with a 2-year non-parole periods. Okay, so Maker, or Mawien, he was jailed for 4 years. Mawien, or Akon, was given 2 years community correction order. So one of them was jailed. So you can't say, okay, it's just the Sudanese getting free reign. They can go in there, rob whatever they want, get the money, get the girls, and get out of jail. You can't say that. Because there's, in the same crime, one of them is doing the time, one of them is not. He's doing a community corrections order. So Mawien, 19, smoked the drug the second time ever on the day he agreed to rob 2 jewellery stores with a friend from his cricket club. They used hammers to smash through the front door of a watch repair shop in Russell Street, Melbourne CBD, terrorising those inside the store who hid in the rear of the room. So what we'll do is I'll just jump now to... Okay, we'll jump back here. So that's the article. You could see the robbery there. It was violent. There were people in the shop. So it looks kind of like in that security footage. I thought it was at night, but there were actually people present there in the shops when it was happening. So an hour later, they smashed up another jewellery store in Coburg. Again, stuffing the jewellery into bags. Here, members of the public were able to apprehend them as they tried to flee, and the pair were arrested by police. So I've actually got a still of that. They stopped them. They were holding chairs back, tackled them down, stopped them, which is bloody awesome. But notice how it wasn't in inner city Melbourne. In the CBD, they didn't stop them. But a bit further north, they did. I'm just saying, that's the latte sippers in there. Like, I can't talk. I've got coffee right here. So in sentencing, Judge Liz Gaynor described the crimes as extremely serious and involving appalling violence. The court heard the owner of the Coburg jewellery store was a refugee from Syria who had suffered months of nightmares and panic attacks. So, and here she talks about his Mawien's excellent character. So what I thought I'd do is I'd like to go through the actual judgment and see a bit more with the surrounding situation, the context of this case, why he was let out, and just to get a bit of a better understanding why the judge made that decision. And I'd like, if you can join me on this journey, please let me know if you agree with what her decision is, because you don't want recidivism. You don't want people to commit crimes again. When you get into jail, criminal, when you get sent to jail, even for the first time, recidivism, where you start getting hardened and will go and commit more crimes, is bloody high. It's game over then. That's why she doesn't want to send these guys to jail. Now, if we have a look here, there's the Daily Mail. They did a take on it. Violent teen thugs linked to Apex crime gangs. Yeah, I mean, they're linking it to Apex. I think they knew him. They knew one of the guys. Guilty of stealing $200,000 worth of jewellery and merchandise from the 2 stores. So, young thug escaped jail despite robbing 2 jewellery stores armed with a sledgehammer and stealing more than $200,000 worth of goods in less than 2 hours. So yeah, I mean, it'd be terrifying. If you were in there, these guys just burst in there with sledgehammers, you don't know what the hell they're going to do. So they just burst through, went in, ransacked the place. So we'll go through we'll have a look at some of the reaction first to this. So I found this on Facebook where 7 News are saying judge apologizes to jewelry store robber. Notice how they're framing that the judge is apologizing to the robber, and all these people are just getting completely pissed off. Because there's a lot of, there's a fair bit of there's crime happening in Melbourne. Everyone's hearing about it, or at least the media is putting it out there. And, I know of 3 instances here in Brisbane that it's happened. I don't know of any other muggings. I do have a story where when I was a student, probably shouldn't say this, when I was a student, I was going back to my car and I saw someone shut the door. And he walks past me and goes, "Oh, how are you going?" And, yeah. I go back and I go to unlock my car and I couldn't work the key because he'd jimmied it with a screwdriver. Now, this guy didn't realize I'd just lost my job a few days ago, so I was in a shit mood and I did not give a fuck. I yelled out, "Stop thief, stop thief," and he bolted. So I ran after him, ran across one street, ran across the other street, caught up to him, and I screamed at him. I said, "Mate," he didn't take anything of mine and went through all his shit. I said, "I'll take you to the cops, but I can't be bothered." And he's bitching and moaning and complaining. I said, "Well, mate, I'm a poor student. I got to work for every bloody penny I have." So I went away. I caught him. No one did anything, which was interesting. I guess, some bald guy chasing after a guy in the middle of the streets, doesn't look too good. But then I thought, you know what? No, that's not fair. He's bugging my car. So I turned around, went back to him and said, "Mate, give me something. You're bugging my car." Didn't have any money, didn't have a phone. Back then, not everyone had mobile phones. I took his wristwatch. Took it home and I hung it up on the wall. Wasn't worth anything, but it was the principle of the thing. So technically I mugged him in the middle of the street because that is vigilante justice, which isn't allowed. And I don't recommend it to anyone to actually do that. But that's just a little story I thought I'd share with you. Probably get me in trouble now. But yeah, no, don't do that because, these days people could be high on ice or anything and can just shoot you. So people are getting pissed. Channel 7 have portrayed it in a way to make the judge look weak and that she's apologizing to them. "Oh, I'm so sorry that I need to send you to jail." Oh, but when you look at it, she's not really sorry to him. She's sorry that she has to send someone to jail because she knows his life's pretty much fucked up from that point on. And this is the other guy who got 4 years. You read through his life story and it is going good, and boom, down. So Avi, Melbourneian, and owns a gym. He's a great public figure here in Australia. He was going off on it as well, understandably, and that's kind of one of the first things that brought it to my attention, but I don't know if he's actually looked. Well, I guarantee you no one would have gone through the judgment or gone through it, because I get the feeling that he'd be quite happy for someone to repent, make it back to the community, and bloody well work hard. Now the pollies. So Alan Tudge, MP. Why am I not surprised? The 21-year-old thug who terrorised jewellery store owners last year got no prison sentence. You watch the video on the line and make up your own mind. We desperately need to a change in state government to strengthen our judicial system. Okay. So they're just playing politics. All these politicians are the same. They'll use these things for their own agenda. They probably won't even look at any of the specifics. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. People are emotionally responding to this. It's pissing you off when you just look at it on face value. It gets you bloody angry. And, I mean, the idea that changing just from one government to the next will, unless they bring in mandatory sentencing or unless they restrict the power of the judges, that's where it gets murky. Because you've got to remember that the judges are given this position of authority to make decisions for our community, for our civilization. And you've got to keep that in context. When you have politicians that are only there for 2 or 3 years coming and trying to overrule them or influence them, it gets a bit scary. So, people are pissed off. Completely understandable. Now we've got Matthew Guy, the opposition leader. He's weighing in on it and he wants to put young thugs on notice with pledge to ban teens with no criminal records mixing with known gang members. So, okay, that sounds interesting. How the hell are you going to do that? How the hell are you going to do that, Guy? Or, Matthew, Mr. Guy, how are you going to do it? What freedoms are you going to take away from people for association? You're going to put chips in all the gang members? This type of stuff here where they start, formulating these ideas or using it for political purposes, that's where it gets dangerous. Because you don't know where it can lead. So, I've got the judgment here, and I'm going to have a coffee. Because I want to go through this. Because I went through it, and it's interesting when you see the circumstances around the decision the judge has made, particularly considering one of the defendants, or one of the criminals now, they're both criminals, one of the criminals has gotten 4 years. Why is he getting 4 years? Why is the other guy only getting a 2-year community service order? And we'll have a look. And let me know if you agree with what she's put in, or in the comments, if you agree with how the judge has made this decision. So, Maker and Akon, you have each pleaded guilty to 2 charges of armed robbery. You, Maker Mawien, have also admitted to prior convictions. Okay? So Maker has prior convictions and it's armed robbery. The maximum penalty for armed robbery is 25 years imprisonment. Okay, so they by doing this jewelry store heist, they're risking 25 years in jail. I mean, it's not worth it when you look at it. So let's have a look at some of the circumstances. At about 4:30 on the 7th of July 2016, the 2 of you and a third youth, Nuok Awi, I'm not even going to pronounce that, and I will call him, went to the Citizens Victorian Watch Repair Shop in Russell Street. So here it is. Here. The 3 of you had your faces covered with material, were wearing gloves and armed with hammers. The 3 of you ran into the shop and began smashing the front door with hammers, understandably terrorizing those present in the shop, causing them to fear for their safety, then hide in a room at the rear of the shop. Still using the hammer, the 3 of you began smashing glass display cabinets in the store and placing watches in the sports bag you had brought with you. This resulted in loss to the victim of stock and damage in excess of $70,000. The 3 of you fled the store, running a short distance along Russell Street to a waiting car driven by an unknown accomplice. So that's interesting. They haven't got the 4th guy. These actions underlie charge 1. Okay, so this is the first charge. The vehicle was captured on CCTV and mobile phone footage taken by witnesses. So there you go. Okay, so they got the vehicle, they saw him there. So this was here, the first robbery, charge 1, 4:30, here, Russell Street. Okay. About an hour and a half later, at 6:09 the same day, you attended Farah Jewellery in Sydney Road, Coburg. Okay, so they went from about here up to here. To this one here, this jewellery store. Again, all 3 of you had your faces covered with material, were wearing gloves. Mawien and the 3rd youth, Awang, carried hammers. You, Mawien, did not. Mawien and Awang began smashing on the front glass doors with the hammers, so that again, those in the stores were terrified, feared for their safety, and ran to hide in the rear room of the store. You, Mawien and Awang, then smashed the glass display cabinets. Mawien assisted the other 2 in placing the assorted gold jewellery in the sports bags that you brought with you. While the 3 of you were still inside the jewellery store, a number of nearby business owners and members of the public gathered at the shop entrance after hearing the commotion caused by the 3 of you inside. So here's a clip of them. They were getting the chairs, they were holding it up, trying to lock them in, to get the robbery. I mean, good on the lads for doing it there, but if these guys are armed with sledgies and high on ice, you got to be careful, particularly since we're all unarmed here in Australia. Sorry, everyone except the criminals are unarmed. Several members of the public held the front door of the store closed in an attempt to keep you inside, while others contacted police. They then began to smash the front door with hammers, which allowed them to exit. They were immediately grabbed by members of the public as you ran from the store and were tackled to the ground, being held until police arrived. So the two guys, Maker and Akon, were caught at this point. They were tackled and held to the ground. A black-coloured sports bag recovered from the two of you, found to contain $75,000 worth of gold jewellery, taken from the store and was returned to the victim. Well, that's good. However, Mawien, who was carrying another sports bag with jewellery, managed to evade the crowd and fled the scene on foot. He was seen running through traffic along Sydney Road. The stolen jewellery, valued at approximately $135,000, including 21-carat yada yada yada, was never recovered. Okay, so they never got that back. They caught the guy. He's fighting it, but it was never recovered. So you know who it's gone to? It's gone to other people in the organisation, probably, or above. Because the further you get into this, you see these guys, they weren't going to get this 70 grand or this 135 grand. Mawien, or Akon, he was only going to get 2 grand from it. So they were hired thugs. They were just hired thugs. They're the guys at the bottom of the bloody food chain. So the previous, okay, here we go. This is where essentially, where she's talking about Maker on the phone to another gentleman, the ringleader, and essentially, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's going into why Maker's not appropriate for children's court or juvenile system anymore, because he's been pretty crap at it, and also how he was, they caught him on intercepted phone communication, so they were under surveillance. And this guy, Taha, was going to sort out girls and hotel rooms and, all this stuff that Maker wanted. Okay, so when they went to police, they were interviewed and, Maker said no comment. Meanwhile, Akon was interviewed and he said he took a necklace, but discovered no further information. Both of them entered pleas of guilty to the charges at an early stage, and no witnesses have been called in either case. Okay, so they pled guilty, so at least they're admitting to it. Now, this is the interesting bit here. The prosecution is satisfied that the evidence on the brief suggests that neither of you were to be directly enriched by these armed robberies. So, why the hell would you be doing it then? That is, you are not to keep the proceeds, you are to be paid in other ways. This would appear to, insofar as you are concerned, be the provision of girls. Mate, your 1 week weakness and a hotel room. How many girls in a hotel room could you get for the $100,000? And then, according to your counsel, Mawien, you were to be paid $2,000 in cash. 2 grand. And some girls in a hotel room. 2 grand's probably worth more. Unsurprisingly, the effect of this most violent offering upon the victims has been severe. Now, this needs to be considered, the impact on the victims, and I'll read through what the impact on them. The first victim, the owner of the Russell Street store, wrote in her victim impact statement that since these crimes she has nightmares, wakes at night, and thinks the offenders are there. She is shocked and unable to trust anyone, is scared for her daughters, starts shaking when she hears or reads about something like this, is frustrated, stressed, unable to sleep, and constantly suffering a headache. So she's traumatized from this. I'm not sure if that's the symptoms for post-traumatic stress disorder. Hopefully she can get some help. She said her shop was closed for 1 week, during which time she had no income. Yep, being a small business owner sucks. There's a whole lot of people that don't realize that you can't go on holidays, you can't get income. It may look all good, money, but it can be bloody tough. And it is. And honestly, I feel like a lot of politicians don't have any idea. And she wrote that the incident has scared off her customers and she has since had less business. So, well, yeah, that's true. That would scare you off if you hear about it. The second victim, whose store was in Coburg, was robbed. So that as a result, his lifestyle had changed dramatically, both at work and at home. He said it continued to cause him financial and emotional anxiety. It should be noted that victim number 2 came to this country as a refugee from Syria, where as a result of the civil war there, he and his family were subjected to violent fighting. He stated, "The loud destruction of the thick glass door almost made my heart stop out of fear, as it reminded me of the sound of bullets that I used to fear might smash my family when we lived in Aleppo." He spoke of the taking of a box containing $130,000 worth of jewellery that he was about to put into a safe before the attack, which he was not compensated for by insurance for 3.5 months. Lucky he got compensated. Damn. Oh. He said, "As a result, my business was hindered severely and I lost a potential $30,000 worth of future earnings as the supply I could offer my customers was diminished." He said the business was closed for 2 days and that he was in a state of constant fear for about 2 weeks after the robbery, until he had a second door installed. He said, "Out of fear that this crime will repeat itself, I now close my store at 4 p.m, when before I would close at 6 p.m, which means I miss 2 hours of serving customers and therefore potential profits. Repairs cost him 25 grand. Furthermore," this is interesting, "a shop that has suffered such damage in a robbery deters potential customers and damages my store's image to the public as it becomes perceived as a dangerous place." He stated that by far the greatest cost to him has been the emotional and psychological trauma consisting of months of nightmares, distress and panic attacks, which were passed on in those terms of stress to his family. So this is stressed out his whole family, and you can understand how that would stress you out, and then it goes on. It's a family business. Oh yeah, this is a family business, but I will not let my family come and help me at the store out of fear that another robbery will occur. Yeah, I mean, I had my children at our business all the time. I mean, we're architects. We got nothing to rob, old computers and pens is pretty much it. So you'd be stupid to rob us. But I know what it's like in a family business, in retail, or in an office setting. You have the kids there. Can't afford not to. I can't help but ask myself, what if the kids were there when the glass was shattered by the axe? I came to Australia to escape the violence that plagues the street of Aleppo and to give my family a safer life. But now I am constantly on edge as the attacks have triggered memories of the traumatic distress I experienced in Syria. So, both of the victims have suffered significantly, not just financially, emotionally as well, and psychologically as well. It's had an impact on them. So now we'll just skip through this. She's going through Maker, his circumstances. And I'll summarize, he came from South Sudan when he was 6. And he lived in Australia, and it kind of just went to shits. He was essentially a repeat offender. He'd been through the juvenile system. He acted smug. He never really, the parole officer considered it not beneficial to put him back through the juvenile system, so he's going to the adult system. And that's where she's, doesn't like sentencing him to that, because it's pretty much the end. If anyone knows any more stats on this, everything I've looked at on repeat offenders, it's really high, it's really bad, and it's really depressing. So I can see why you want to keep people out of these situations. Because, once you're in there, you're not going to be a productive member of society, very, very likely. Maybe I'm wrong. Please let me know in the comments. Give me some stats or some information that I can add. But that's what I could find now. So let's have a look at Akon. She's turning to him. So he's now 19 years. Recent injuries and exact birth certificate. Okay, so he's from Sudan. Reveal that he's actually younger than he thought he was. He gave a nominated date of birth on his entry to Australia, but he was actually younger. So he was in fact 18 at the time of this offending. You have no prior subsequent criminal conviction. So this is his first ever crime that he committed, as opposed to his friend, who's had several priors. So he was born in Sudan. At age 2, with your parents' consent, your aunt took you to Kenya. So from Sudan to Kenya. Your aunt took you and her four children to a refugee camp in Kenya, where she gave birth to a 5th child. You lived at what was then the largest refugee camp in the world for 4 years. It was apparently a very violent environment, being among inmates and because of regular attacks by local Kenyan people. You apparently continue to suffer from traumatic memories of that time. So he was traumatized as a child. You'd be surprised at how much damage that can cause to someone. Peterson says, your job as a parent, first 4 years, you've got to get them socialized. You've got to get them being able to play with other kids. If you don't, it's kind of game over too within those first 4 years. So trauma at early childhood can really create a lot of issues for someone. Your family lived in a tin and cardboard shack and you attended a local school. You never again had contact with your natural parents. Now that's interesting because during his bail, he was allowed to go to Sudan, and Seven painted it, or one of the news stations painted it, that he's allowing to go on this overseas holiday while on bail, and the victims were all shocked and appalled. So, I looked into it. Apparently he was going back to try and see some of his family. In 2005, when you were 5 or 6, your aunt and the children arrived in Australia after being accepted as refugees. So he was, a 5 or 6 year old kid, the age of my daughter. The family settled in the Sunshine area, so they settled here on Western Melbourne. You're the 3rd youngest of these children, now mostly adults, with whom you have close relationships. All of them have gone to undertake education and employment. You are the first member of the family ever to have been charged with a criminal offense. Could you imagine that? How pissed your family would be if you were the first one, particularly if you came to another country as refugees and you're building yourself up. Everyone's educated, everyone's working. And you're the black sheep. Fuck, that's bad. You attended St. Paul's Primary School in Sunshine and then the Catholic Regional College in St. Albans, where you continued to Year 12 VCAL, Victorian something. I'm assuming that's like our tertiary entry school. In primary school, you met a teacher, Matthew Shawcross, who is now the deputy principal of the Mother of God Primary School in Ardea. You developed a very close relationship. Mr. Shawcross, in evidence, described himself as a father figure to you and a man that has taken strong mentoring in your life. That's interesting. You'll see, having a father figure and a role model is very important for young men. Very important. And a woman can't do that job. A man needs to do that job. And that's why having fathers is so important. That's why having male role models is so important. It's why allowing men to have men's sheds is so important. Mr. Shawcross introduced you to the Sunshine Heights Cricket Club, where he played. Okay. So here's a little, typical cricket club. You were described by him in his written reference and on evidence at the plea hearing as a small, shy boy who enthusiastically took to cricket, at which you then excelled. Okay, so he was a good cricket player. You thereafter captained numerous teams, eventually being selected in under-16, under-18 representative teams. In 2014, you trialled for the under-17 state team. Since age 16, you played A-grade cricket for your club, 1 year winning the Most Valuable Player award. It's interesting how all these things are brought up here in the hearing, how the judge considers it all, because, like I was saying, the judge has to dwell on this. They need to spend time to make this decision because what they decide is going to affect this person's life for the rest of their existence. It's going to affect that person's family's life for the rest of their existence. It's going to affect the whole community. Oh, and he's an outstanding bowler. They used to call me the ghost when I played cricket at school because the ball would just fly right through me. This also, at age 17, resulted in you being awarded the Brimbank Athlete of the Year award. You also played for the Albion Junior Football Club until your arrest in 2016. You continue to play cricket to the current day. He worked at McDonald's for the last 2 years of high school. Poor guy. In 2014, you worked briefly in a meat factory in Brooklyn. Then in 2015, you completed a 6-month Cert 2 in building construction. He's umpired cricket since he was in year 11, and for some years on a voluntary basis taught Dinka, the native Sudanese language, at local primary schools. Both of these activities ceased with your arrest in July 2016 when you lost your working with children's card. According to Jean Bell, who oversaw your youth justice supervision bail, this was a great disappointment and continuing loss for you. Mr. Shawcross describes you as a person who has always demonstrated a strong work ethic, desire to succeed. He said you were a modest and humble person who felt he deserved little of the support he had enjoyed over the years. However, leading up to this offence, you had undergone a period of reversals. In late 2015, you suffered a stress fracture in your back. At this time, you were training for the Victorian Under-19 cricket squad. You were not selected. You had had hopes of a career in cricket, and this apparently affected you very badly. So, he had an incident in his life, injury that kind of affected him and weakened him. He couldn't overcome the dragon. Soon after you broke your left wrist while playing basketball. This stopped you playing cricket in 2015-16 summer, and you drifted from the positive environment of the cricket club as you could not train or play. You had shortly before this offering, as I had said, completed your Cert 2 in studies, were unable to find work and had no income as there had been a problem with processing your Centrelink application. Your car keys were stolen, and you were unable to afford the $600 cost of replacing them and the car locks. You also at this time discovered that you had siblings living in the Sudan, whom you had never met and wanted to make contact, but felt it was disloyal to your aunt to make a request of this kind. So, the shit had gone down. It happens in threes, doesn't it? Break your leg, or what is it? Break his wrist, bugger up his back, get your car keys stolen, not have any money, not get a job. So, what happens next isn't surprising what this led to. In evidence on the plea, Mr. Bull gave his opinion that there had been a lead-up of about 12 months in your life before this offending, where your life had become dislocated and somewhat distressing. At the time of this offending, you were unoccupied, unemployed, and not engaged in sport and without an income. And you had begun mixing with local peers you had previously had little to do with. Idle hands. Idle hands are the devil's plaything. So this is the gang members that the opposition leader wants to keep good boys away from. In their company, you began smoking cannabis, and on one occasion, 2 weeks before this offending, smoked methamphetamine or ice for the first time. Okay, so 2 weeks before he did this, he had his first meth, or he smoked his first bit of meth ice. On the day of the offending, you met up with Maker, who you knew, and Aweng, who you did not, in their company. You smoked ice for the second time, which you told Mr. Bell was in significantly greater quantity than you had before. The proposed offering was brought up, and you were offered $2,000 to participate in what you thought was one armed robbery, but became two. You being told you would not be paid unless you participated in both. You did not carry the hammer on the second occasion. Whilst I regard this as an explanation for your offending, I make it clear I did not consider any of these factors, as I've outlined above, as justification for the terrible crimes. Well, good. That then caused so much damage, loss, and suffering to your victims. However, I do regard your use of ice on this day of significance, as it appears this shocking offending by you is entirely out of character for the wealth of materials I've received from professionals, your community, family, and friends, as to your normal presentation up to the offending and subsequent progress in now 9 months since. So you can see that it's all kind of, the shit hit the fan, it all fell apart. His coping mechanisms were drugs, and then, he fell in with the wrong crowd. He started doing meth. Now, if you don't think that drugs can affect your mental state, you've either never drunk alcohol and seen how that can affect your state, or you've never been hungry and experienced how that can affect your mental state, let alone something as hardcore as meth or ice. I had a conversation with a young lady who, within about 5 minutes, because she worked in a retail job she hated, within about 5 minutes she was complaining about old white people. So you can just picture, she had everything but the purple hair. And I was trying to explain to her that, maybe it's not a class thing. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that, particularly when men get old, their testosterone levels drop. And that can affect them mentally. That's why you have grumpy old man syndrome. Or maybe women going through menopause affects them emotionally too. She never thought of that. But then again, I guess you don't need to think about things like that at communist school. So back to this. You told psychologist Jeffrey Cummings, whose report dated the 21st of Feb 2017 was tendered on the plea that you were under the influence of ice at the time of your offending, Mr. Cummings writing. He stated he thought he would never have become involved in this offending had it not been for the fact he had smoked amphetamine with the co-offenders on the day in question. Mr. Bell, who, as I've said, oversaw your bail conditions and had been in regular contact with you throughout this time, stated in his report dated 9th of March 2017 that in talking of your use of amphetamine on this day, he, that is you, stated that he initially felt very strong rush, then felt high levels of confidence to the extent of feeling untouchable and invincible. Unfortunately, the current ice epidemic and the resultant plethora of criminal cases arising from it, heard in this court, means that the description of its effects upon a user is one very familiar to judges sitting on such cases. Significantly, in my view, Mr. Bell went on to conclude, it is my view that Akon's brief subsistence use experience had a direct relationship to his offending in this instance. See, this brings up an interesting point, because ice is so cheap to make. Everyone can make it, with a few chemicals at home, and it's flooding our rural communities. See, it's flooding our cities. It's everywhere. The government should just make eckies illegal. Eckies legal. I mean, what's the worst thing that happens there? It used to be legal. You just hug everyone and, suck lollipops. You don't go bash and shit with bloody baseball bats. You were remanded in adult custody for 1 month after your arrest, being released on supervised bail. Mr. Shawcross in evidence said that he and others who knew you were both flabbergasted at your offending and then very angry with you over it. He stated he visited you in jail and found you distressed, tearful, and remorseful. Mr. Bell, who assessed you in custody for your suitability for youth justice supervised bail, said he found you open and willing to discuss your offending and to take responsibility. Okay, so he's repenting. Well, he's admitted guilt. He said, however, you were also overwhelmed by the prison environment, describing you in evidence as not confident and like a deer in the headlights. You were released on bail with conditions including a curfew, which you have abided by until the 28th of March when I lifted it. So what happened is the judge lifted his curfew so he could go to cricket because she thought it would be a good influence on him to go back to play cricket. And the media started photographing him and making a big deal about it. Playing cricket on bail, yada, yada, yada. But you can see this. The cricket was probably one of the best influences in his life that he needed. You know? Needed to be around functioning, sensible men who were playing a sport together, kind of to give him a bit of structure, because losing that, even if he just goes to umpire, losing that was part of his downward spiral. Mr. Bell described your progress on bail as exceptional. In addition to attending regularly upon him, you have also attended many sessions with Yasser drug counselor Sophia. In her court report, Ms. Ahern described you as an inexperienced substance user who was open and honest in your dealings with her and who did not miss one appointment. Mr. Bell also stated you had not missed a single appointment with him, were always early and engaged fully, so he was early. So you'd have to argue he's taking it seriously, not like his mate, Mr. Repeat Offender. Turning to your drug treatment, your analysis consistently proved negative for methamphetamines. There have, however, this is interesting, have been some continuing difficulties with cannabis use, which, however, you have always been open about with Miss Ahern. And she stated, he has reported these lapses to be symptomatic of struggling to cope with the stress associated with his legal issues and uncertainty in relationship to his future. I think we can forgive him for wanting to smoke a joint with all this shit going down. It's another thing that probably shouldn't be illegal. You also discussed this with Mr. Bell, and that use has apparently dropped to sporadic only. Miss Ahern wrote, you have no issues with alcohol and maintain abstinence from ice use, and now much reduced your cannabis use. She noted that while seeing her, you have maintained study, employment, and resumed your cricketing and other sporting activities. She concluded, it has been a pleasure to support Akon whilst he has been on the supervised bail program. It is of the writer's opinion that he is a talented, humble, respectful, and remorseful young man who has executed motivation for change. It was in her opinion that you had exceptional prospects for rehabilitation. Because you've got to think, these people have to deal with a lot of the dregs that wouldn't even, just going through the motions. I couldn't handle that job. On your release on bail, you began your Cert 3 in Building and Construction at the Trade Institute of Victoria in Williamstown North. Your teacher, William Spencer, on his letter dated 20th of Feb 2017, wrote that he was caught by surprise when he learned of your offending. He wrote that you had immediately informed him of your offending and the charges. You were concerned to finish all the theory work before possible incarceration and have done this, Mr. Spencer writing. You had asked me to do the theory work at home. This is funny. No one ever asked to do the theory, take the theory books home. Oh, well, it's construction. I know a few builders that would take the theory home. Mr. Spencer wrote that he regarded you as a credit to yourself for the changes you had made to your work ethic and your lifestyle. You have recently gained employment via the Victorian Trade Institute's partnership with a hired contractor and have worked every day since your first placement on the 21st of March. You continue to be supervised by Mr. Bell, and I regard his reports and evidence in court as most significant. In his report of the 9th of March, Mr. Bell described your engagement on bail as exceptional in both attendance and in his effort to engage meaningfully with both services. He said you are not particularly streetwise and that he regarded you as an inexperienced drug user lacking in sophistication. You also told Mr. Bell you did not believe you would have offended had you not used ice on that day. Importantly, he also wrote, you are a young man who has displayed consistently and what I consider to be genuine remorse and empathy for the victims and general members of the public that have been exposed to his offending. His remorse has been evident from the outset, and his willingness to engage with the youth justice in the manner that he has clearly demonstrated his capacity to reflect upon his actions toward personal improvement. Akon has not missed a single session with youth justice without a reasonable explanation and appropriate communication prior to his appointment. So he's making an effort. He noted that you have extensive family and community support, including the cricket club and members. Okay. The judge is saying that I should interpolate here that I've received a raft of references from senior members of the cricket club attesting to your previous good character over and above your cricketing capacities and describing your remorse and contrition and progress with the club since your release on bail. Further, on every occasion that you have attended court before me, you have been accompanied by your family, friends, and numerous members of that club. That's interesting. Being both your peers and senior administrative officers of the club, including the president. Okay, so unfortunately, Mr. Mawien, your sporting prowess combined with the appalling and spectacular nature of your offending has understandably attracted media attention. However, it has to some extent been exacerbated by a continual reference to you as either an Apex gang member or engaged in an Apex-related offending. My close examination of the materials does not lead me to find that you have any connections with the Apex gang or ever had any such connections. You have been photographed by press at cricket training. An article written when with your curfew hours varied to allow you to attend cricket, thus being considered pro-social environment. Okay, so there she's explaining it. So he hasn't reoffended, he's maintained his bail thing, and he's had to deal with all this stuff. Probably was Apex gang who had organised the crime, but well, it is. The guy who organised it above these guys was a member of the gang. He's using these young guys as foot soldiers. So, okay. Explaining that ICE had to deal with it. It was Mr. Bell's view that your prospects for rehabilitation were very strong, if not excellent. He stated that you had demonstrated a maturity and attitude during the bail period that strongly suggests he had grown personally and developed a stronger sense of identity and self-worth. He said you had taken the process of bail very seriously with positive, commendable progress. I wonder how many people they have to put up with that don't. You don't really hear about the success stories in the media, do you? It was also the view of Mr. Cummings that you have spoken in a reasonable, insightful manner concerning his offending behaviour and how his behaviour and that of co-offenders would have adversely impacted the victims, apologising for that behaviour during your interview with him. Overall, on the material and evidence I've received both as to your life before this offending and since, from experience, respected professionals, as well as the vast host of references I've received from respected members of your community, I'm satisfied that this shocking and appalling offence was very much out of character. I'm further satisfied that but for your ingestion of ice on that day, you have not engaged in it. I am satisfied it explains this dramatic and terrible change in a person who was normally, as Mr. Shawcross and Mr. Bell describes you in evidence in court, and as did many others in their written references, as a quiet, kind, respectful, and rather humble young man who was law-abiding and productive. A common theme throughout these references was a sense of amazement that you should have offended at all, much less in this destructive and violent way. Well, it's unless you know how this can affect you, it's shocking, this stuff. The prosecution has understandably submitted that I should deal with you by way of sentence of imprisonment or placement in Youth Justice Centre. The learned prosecutor submitted that the object gravity of this offending is such that no other response would be appropriate. Further, it is clear that this alarming and criminal behaviour, that is the violent raids upon jewellery shops such as those you invaded, is becoming prevalent. Well, yeah, it is. It's happening again and again and again. you've got to think, if you're high on ice, are you going to give a shit if the last guy you heard in the media got caught about it? No, you're fucking invincible. You're the man. You're going to go do it. Get yourself those babes in the hotel room. So I kind of, when you're that far committed, I don't know how far deterrence can work. I accept that these are strong and cogent reasons to consider the protection of the community, and principles of general deterrence have a significant role to play in the sentencing exercise before me. Had you been older, ageism, had your behaviour before and after this offending been any less impressive? Had the expert assessments and references from respected members of the community been any less supportive, I would not have hesitated to adopt the prosecution submission. Again, one cannot understate the seriousness of this offending, its shocking violence and utter lawlessness. The prosecution has now conceded that specific deterrence, that is, punishment designed to deter you from offending in this way in the future, is not required in your case. Okay, there you go. The prosecution has conceded. So, the prosecutor is admitting that it's not required. They don't believe that Akon will need deterrence, will need jail to deter him. Nor does it submit that you now present a future danger to the community. Okay, so he doesn't need it, and he's not a danger to the community according to the prosecution. So there's one thing, okay? So we can put him in jail to make a sign of it. He's not considered a danger to the community, and it's not required as a deterrence for him. Do we want to piss that money up against the wall to kind of turn someone into a hardened criminal? I should add that I was particularly impressed by Mr. Bell's support of you, not only because of his extensive experience as a youth worker, but because his recommendations in respect to you differ markedly from those he gave to your co-accused. Okay, there you go, right there. This is everything to do with the circumstances of the case. You can't argue that these Sudanese guys are getting off when one of them goes to jail and gets hammered and the other one doesn't and gets praise. Mr. Bell's view was that you would not cope in the adult prison system due to your youth and unsophistication, but that youth justice detention, although a better opinion for you in his view, would still prove difficult and was not warranted in your case. Interesting. As I stated in my sentencing remarks in relation to Mr. Mawien, the courts are always anxious to promote and support proved and demonstrated reform in an offender, particularly when that offender is young. Yeah, because you don't want them to get in the system. This is not based on concern necessarily for that particular offender and his or her future, but more based on the premise that reformation is the best protection in the long term for the community at large. Yeah, that's a good point. He's repented, he needs a reform. It is in the community interest that demonstrated reform, particularly by the young offender of previously good character, should be encouraged and supported. The prosecution position is, however, that no matter the gains made by you, the objective seriousness of this offending and its worrying growing prevalence in the community are such that only a term of imprisonment or detention is appropriate in your case. Because it's happening more often, they think they need to make a statement. After much anxious consideration, I've decided not to accept this submission for the following reasons. So she's not accepting the prosecution submission. You were 18 at the time of this offending and therefore, at law, a youthful offender, so that rehabilitative measures are considered to be more important than a sentencing exercise involving an older, more mature man. Your early plea of guilt, I accept, has not only saved the community the time and expense of your trial and your victims the trauma of giving evidence. See, that's an interesting thing, because that would be really traumatic for the victims, having to go to court, having to go through that whole process, but as a sign of your genuine remorse, by you above and beyond remorse arising from apprehension and potential punishment. This is based on the evidence and reports of Mr. Bell, Mr. Cummins, and many of your written references. You also wrote a letter of apology to the court, which judges often view with skepticism, coming as they do from accused people facing jail time and hoping to further their cause. However, I find yours to be genuine and an extremely remorseful letter, with appropriate and evident concern for the victims affected by your actions. I want to interpolate here, Mr. Prosecutor. I would like my sentencing remarks, and if they are willing to receive it, the letter written by Mr. Mawien forwarded to the victims of the robberies. It is not obviously going to do anything much, but it may at least reassure them in terms of some knowledge of those people who attacked them that the actions taken by the court. Okay, so that's good. That's interesting. She wants the victims to receive his letter and receive these remarks. And Mr. McWilliams, I'll pass that on to the informant, Your Honour, and I'll make inquiries as to whether they're prepared to receive those documents. It's Her Honour, it's entirely up to them, but it may be a worthwhile exercise. Mr. McWilliams, indeed, Your Honour, grateful, Your Honour. Thank you very much. Part 3. You're a person with no convictions who, until the period leading to this offending, has always led a pro-social, productive and lawful life. I'm satisfied this offending is very much out of your character. Well, judging by what we've read here tonight, it seems very much out of his character. You were not involved in the planning prior to this offending, joining this enterprise largely by chance. Although responsible for the actions of your co-accused, pardon me, you did not carry a hammer at the second armed robbery or directly cause the damage to that shop. That is, you played a somewhat lesser role in this offending. Importantly, I accept, as I've said, that but for your ingestion of ice on that day, you would not have engaged in this offending. If you were an experienced ice user, this would not assist you, as the authorities make it clear that those familiar with the effects of ice upon them cannot then claim mitigation on the basis that they were under the influence of drugs when they offended. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Because, you know, I guess, don't you need to take more of these things to affect you? I guess the premise is that you would understand the implications of consuming the drug. So you should be smart enough not to consume it. But can you get addicted to ice? It's something I'll have to look up into. You, however, were a most inexperienced user of this drug and could not have been expected to know its effects on you as it did. You have an immense array of support from your family, and that's probably one of the most important things. And I note this is a pro-social and responsible family whose members never prior to your offending, have been involved in any infraction of the law. You also enjoy considerable and impressive community support. I agree that your progress on bail has been exceptional, that you have undertaken and embraced every opportunity afforded to you to your rehabilitation, including drug counseling and no longer use ice. I regard your prospect of rehabilitation as extremely positive. This assessment involves your previous and subsequent good history, the support you enjoy, but additionally your commendable attention to your studies despite the stress and tension you had to deal with since your release on bail and you are now in employment. I mean, that is a good point there. The fact that he's gotten a job, he's kept studying, he's kept going on, while all this shit has been going on, that's commendable. That is commendable. You've been the subject of much unfavorable media attention, and while this was not unexpected, you nevertheless continued on your rehabilitation, which I regard as particularly praiseworthy in a youth of your age. At a further plea hearing on the 28th of March, I indicated that I had decided to defer sentencing of this matter for a further 12 months. I said that I was not convinced that because of your youth, previous good history and progress on bail, you are not a suitable vehicle for general deterrence. I am also not yet satisfied that you are not. Your progress over the past 9 months has been of an extremely high order, but the offending you engaged in my view, was so very serious that a greater period of demonstration by you that this offending was truly a one-off and that you are a young man who does not fit this category is required. I will therefore order that the sentencing in this matter be deferred for 1 year from the 28th of March 2017, involving the imposition of the previous bail conditions you've had to observe, bar the curfew. Okay. So the judge has decided to defer this for a year until, just to make sure. I'm lifting the curfew for 2 reasons. First, I do not wish it to interfere with your employment in an area where very early starts and late finishes are common. Second, it is my view important that you demonstrate your good intentions outside of that particular restriction. I'm satisfied that any potential danger to the community this might present is compensated for by the continued supervision of Mr. Bell and the other conditions of your bail. I note again that you are not now regarded by the prosecution as a danger to the community. If you successfully complete that 12 months without incident, you will be placed on a community corrections order and will then be under the supervision of the Office of Corrections for a subsequent period of time, as well as being required to undertake significant hours of unpaid community work. Pursuant to S6AAA of the Sentencing Act, I declare Akon that you have not pleaded guilty. I would have sentenced you to 5 years imprisonment and ordered you to serve a minimum term of 3 years. Wow. Given my decision to defer your sentence, Ma'am, it is not appropriate that I make a sentence declaration in the face of a not guilty plea at this time. Thank you. Right now, is there anything else I need to attend to? Okay. And there's just a few other things that she's going in here, but that essentially is the judgment. So, here we go. I thought I said, okay. I use fairly formal court language. I've said that because of your progress on bail, because you have no prior convictions and other reasons, I'm deferring your sentence for 12 months. You've still got to abide by bail conditions. If you are successful, I'll then place you on a community corrections order, which will go for some time. All right, you'll be under the supervision of the youth. Justice will be in charge of community corrections. You got that? Offender, yes. I need to make it very clear. You put one toenail out of line. Anything. You make any mistakes. If you fail to keep up with the very good work you've done, you will not be getting the community corrections order at all. This is still a time of you proving yourself, and this is because, as you must understand, that this was exceptionally serious offending. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for that. So, sorry, that was long. If you've stuck through with this, I'm impressed. So, that's pretty much the situation. That's the reason the judge made that call. Do you think it's fair to say? Is it fair how the media's portrayed it? Is it fair how people are responding? That they're angry at the judge, that they're angry at the judicial system. You know, she hasn't let him off. She's given him another 12 months of bail conditions where he has to behave in that period. And if he slips up, boom, he's going straight to jail. But judging by, everything put forward here, judging by the particular circumstances here, judging by the fact that, so many people in the community are actually there to support him, that he used the methamphetamine on the second time, and that would fuck you up. I agree with this decision. I think the idea of keeping this guy out of prison is probably smart. I can see where the judge is, why the judge has made this decision, and it's not. You send him to jail, it's game over. Send him to jail, it's game over. Here, he's got an opportunity to rebuild his life and become a contributing member of our society. I mean, the people are saying, send him back, kick him out of the country, yada, yada, yada. He's been here since he was 6. He's playing cricket. You know, he's become an Australian. He's becoming part of the culture. You know, he's working hard. So it's not like, you know, someone's come over here and is on bail and then commits a bloody, you know, starts running around murdering people or shooting people and committing a religiously motivated terrorist act. This is a young guy who was in a bad sort, who was given some hard drugs and was given an opportunity to make a quick, easy buck, who hasn't been tempted and who couldn't fall to that regard. So I see where the judge is coming from. I don't think it's anything like the media's portraying it. It's much more nuanced and sophisticated. I wish this guy all the best. You know, now that he's on bail, he should be watching all these Jordan Peterson ones, getting 12 rules for life, getting into that and getting his life sorted out and getting back on track. But it sounds like he's doing it. It does. His other friend should really, you know, try and pull back from that path he's going down. It's going to be bloody hard because he's in prison. I feel sorry for the victims. You know, having your shops robbed and this happening in Victoria is just insane. But I can see where the judge is coming from, and I think a lot of people are just aren't aware of what's going on and are just jumping to conclusions, which I can completely understand. Well, thank you all very much for watching this episode of Heise Says. I'm sure it was a long one. Sorry that I'm getting a bit hoarse. Let me know if this was worth it, if I'll do it again. Maybe I should pull it apart a bit more to make it easier for people to follow, but I thought it's necessary to just go through it here because I'm seeing so many people getting so angry about it and just responding in such a way, and it's going to weaken people's political position, I think, by getting distracted by stuff like this. You know, there is a crime problem in, you know, Victoria. There's a crime problem everywhere. I think it's going to be exacerbated by the economy. If times get worse, I think you're going to have more crime. I think you've got, you know, identity politics is going to start causing more problems with crime. More men are going to be disenfranchised, locked out of the systems. They're going to start clumping up. Maybe that's crazy. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this episode. Please let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think the judge was fair? Do you think they should have just sent him to jail and thrown away the keys to kind of act as a deterrent? Or do you agree with her decision? I'm going to have a subscribe button up here. Over on this side, I'll have some other videos that I've created. You can support me on Patreon and other things if you like this type of content. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely day. See ya.